So True Detective Season 3, Episode 1, The Great War in Modern Memory, is written by the creator of True Detective, Nick Pizzolatto, and this and the second episode are directed by Jeremy Saulnier, the director of the movie Green Room with Patrick Stewart. What's going to be interesting to see is Saulnier directed the first two episodes, but bailed on the show at episode 3 because of creative differences. So we will see how that affects the show after these first two episodes premiered tonight. But sticking to episode 1, it opens with a nice establishing shot of the town of West Finger, Arkansas, and transitions to a nice close-up of the kid's bicycle wheel, with that sound of the bicycle wheel perfectly flipping to the sound of the ticking wristwatch of Detective Wayne's in 2015, showing us with that watch this season is going to be about time. Time is almost its own character in this season, having 3 separate storylines of the same detective and him losing a lot of his memory. So we first see Mahershala Ali as Detective Wayne Hayes as an old man in 2015, and then we see him in 1990 at the police station for his deposition, 10 years after the appraisal case he worked on. An interesting line in this first scene set in 1990 is one of the detectives saying to Wayne, "What you don't remember, you don't know that you don't remember." It's like Dr. Seuss riddle here, but it's important. The interesting thing about this 1990 timeline is you're wondering, did he lose any memory by this point? Was it starting to happen? They keep brilliantly toying with that idea. And that's also shown here when the other detective says, "You have memory problems, right?" And Wayne's like, "What?" But it transitions to him saying this to himself as an older man on a recorder. So it's not totally clear if that was actually said in the 90s, if that's just a transition out. But good, it keeps it up in the air here about his memory there. Well, we also learned this 1990 timeline, they're looking to overturn a conviction that was on the Purcell case 10 years later. So it's an interesting development here and trying to figure out what caused this turn of events. So when it transitions beautifully to him as an old man, listening to himself as on the recorder, giving himself reminders, it's sad seeing him doing this and seeing the struggle of older people who have Alzheimer's and any memory issues whatsoever. He's literally got to say the date. He's got to say the TV people are coming, to look at his notes. And then he says, "Remember the nightstand if you need it." And there's a gun in there. Now, is that for protection? Being that he's a former detective, he knows that he used it? Or is that also maybe a dark option that's there for him if he wants to end his own life, if this is too miserable for him of a situation? I really love the subtle acting by Ali here. Right away, just seeing him act as this older man, you can tell he's up for all these different ages he is playing, and he's the actor to carry that and do that. He's a powerhouse. So we start now in the storyline set November 7th, 1980 in West Finger, Arkansas, and it's coming from the narration of him in 1990 at his deposition, and it's coming from him as an old man talking to this interviewer. And we learned that day was the day Steve McQueen died, and this is important too because these little things are something he's always going to remember. That's a significant thing, like the full moon that night. That helps someone who has memory issues. And we see in this timeline the dad, Tom, of these kids who went missing, played by Scoot McNairy, who's a great actor, who's been in stuff more recently, like the show Godless on Netflix, and he's popped up in a lot of things, but he's solid for this type of role. And he says goodbye to his kids for the last time, William and Julie, and tells them to be home by 5:30. It's so interesting too, because in this time in the 80s, people were so loose about just letting their kids out on their bikes by themselves, no parent guardianship, and there was a lot of kidnapping going on at this time in this country. So it is kind of wild seeing that here, that was like a thing where that really wouldn't happen today. And it's really great how they shot this. This is why this episode's worth a rewatch, because then you see every single person they pass, the trash man on the go-kart, the kids in the Volkswagen buggy that's purple, and more. And these are all people they'll talk to later on the episode. So it's cool seeing it, watching it back, and then, oh, that's where that person was. That's where that person. You catch those little things. And for me, what really caught my eyes, those 3 punks that are in that bug, they really looked at the 2 kids with the death stare that day. So I feel like they started the cause of events. They obviously didn't murder these kids, but something happened between them. So now we meet his partner, Roland West, and he's very similar to the character Woody Harrelson plays in season 1. If you haven't seen season 1, do that now. But if you have, obviously, Woody Harrelson was a tough guy, just like Roland is here. But I'm happy that Wayne is much different from Matthew McConaughey's character in season 1. Because that would have been too much of similarities to me there, and I was worried they were going to go that way. But Wayne is similar in some ways, but mostly he's his own character, which is good. And right away, you're learning Wayne's the softer one. He's sympathetic. There's an important line Roland says here. You ever see yourself getting married? And he says something along the lines of, not going to put my future children and wife through that. So this is a guy who originally believed he didn't want to get married and it was a bad idea for him to have kids. So that's interesting. What is he talking about? What is his crazy side that we're going to eventually see play out that might mess up his kids and anger his wife? And then an important scene I really liked here was when Roland and Wayne see the little fox, by the way, which was adorable. I don't know why that thing was so adorable, but they really zoomed in on that shot with the face. But you see how different they react to this fox. Roland is quick to draw his gun. He is the aggressor, and he's cold. But again, Wayne's more warm, empathetic. He's also a thinker before he acts, and he's sensitive. So that's just an important thing right there, how they're brilliantly developing these two characters by how they're reacting to certain things. Like, again, seeing just a baby fox. And we get some really cool camera work here when Tom is driving around at night, first looking for his kids. It really puts you in his shoes well. There's a shot they get from inside the car, really setting that eerie feeling of just a night in Arkansas in the 80s, and your kids are missing. So really good job there with the cinematography. And he also passed that trash man on the go-kart late at night. So that's something to take note of as well. That guy just kept going all day. Now he's a guy I think he didn't do anything clearly. He's definitely a red herring, but he definitely knows something. And then back now to Roland and Wayne together, and we get a great bit of writing here. Roland goes, "Why'd you kill a boar, not the fox? I eat the boar. If I missed it, it's my butt. I like an even playing field." So I'm totally with Wayne here, and it shows how he's a little more rational and only brings out violent tendencies if it's necessary and justified. Where Roland, like the angle, if you look at people that hunt for sport, he's the guy who couldn't care about, if it's for food or not. He likes to do it and couldn't care about the animal's life. So just quick lines like this aren't boring because, again, they're making these characters develop and us understand them right off the bat. And then they get the call that the kids are missing. So I like the pace already of this episode. They get to it, not too quickly, but they didn't take too long either. And I love when they get the call here that the kids are missing, when they get to the scene. I love the little humor they throw in where they both take out a piece of gum because they've been boozing all night. And I really love the transitions they've been using in this episode. Like one pops up right here when they're first at the house, and the interviewer in the current timeline, her voice comes over and is like, "Is this setup okay for you?" And then it shows him looking. Something's going on under all of this. These transitions are giving us hints about his memory here and what he's really even saying to this interviewer. So in 2015, we actually see the interviewer's face, and it's played by Sarah Gadon, aka Alias Grace, on Alias Grace on Netflix. Great actress, so she's perfect for this kind of role. And see, when he talks about this night at this old age, he still remembers the full moon and Steve McQueen dying. He knows the big, but he might be skimping the little here. And he says important lines here, that he worked the case again when this conviction happened and it was reopened. And then his wife published the book. He said he originally, before the case he was working on, he would think before Nam and after Nam in his life. And he says now in current time, it's before Price-Sell case and after Price-Sell case. So this is the big life event that switches from the Vietnam War to the case he worked on as a detective. That encompasses his whole life and what he thinks about constantly. And he says it keeps coming back. And the interviewer here says the wife's book was remarkable that she wrote. Sorry for your loss. And this is some remarkable acting by Mahershala Ali here when he's crying about missing her. It's so damn believable. All his mannerisms and look in his eyes line up with an old man. So impressive stuff. This isn't a role you can just cast anyone to play. It really relies on his shoulders. And he has to carry the show. 3 timelines, gonna be in every scene it seems like. So it's work. And you see here, which kind of relates to season 1, that same relationship towards their cases that Roland and Wayne have here in 1980, because Wayne goes up to Tom and is comforting him and calming down that night. And Tom basically makes him promise about the case and that he's going to keep looking. It raises the stakes for Wayne and shows how attached and personal these cases become for him. And I'm sure someone like Roland, like Woody Harrelson's character in season 1 did, they have that personality where they can detach easier from these cases and not let it engulf them like Wayne's character here or Matthew McConaughey in season 1. It becomes their life, and they don't stop working. They just keep working on the case. So then we meet Lucy, the wife here, and she's a prostitute. And even when Lucy and Tom are fighting here, Wayne has a great calming effect on them, telling everyone they need to work together for the kids. So He's really likable, Wayne, and that's maybe the difference for the audience in Matthew McConaughey's character in season 1, where that was kind of split because he was very polarizing, where I think Wayne is polarizing in his own ways, but he's more just universally likable. And this actually might be one of my favorite parts of the episode. When they first start looking through the house, I really enjoyed the music pumping up here in the back, and the show is just going back to what works from season 1. It's more focused. It really is like a reset this season from the mess that season 2 was. Smart they went with this approach. Even though it's 3 timelines, it's way less confusing than season 2 already. You can get this show easily. It's still smart, but it makes sense, and the normal viewer can still take it in, and the very high IQ viewer can still be satisfied and stimulated. So it's finding that perfect balance, where season 2 just went berserk. So things get super weird here when Wayne finds Playboys under the bed in Will's room, and in the closet he finds a damn peephole into Julie's room. And it was smart by Wayne here not to mention to Tom the peephole, just in case it's the mom or dad who made that peephole, or they're covering for who we're going to find out later about, Dan, or anyone they know might do that. You don't want them knowing that information. So we'll see how that peephole relates to this whole story. So you see the 2 detectives go around town asking about that day, the people in town, and people mention this place, the Devil's Den, where one woman says weird stuff happens. And now everyone starts mentioning different people that are suspicious. And we also go back to the house and we learn about Dan O'Brien, Lucy's cousin, who's like an uncle to the kids. And we learn he stayed in Will's room. So he's clearly suspect number 1 in my book. So I love here this little montage with Wayne here. And he says, I didn't go to sleep that first night. I stayed out, tried to find a trail. I was a tracker, you see. And they had the pumped up music. So this is what the show, again, was missing in season 2. A total BA here, like Matthew McConaughey's character was. You need an ace detective for a show like this so it separates itself from other detective shows. And a really awesome shot here of when he's looking at night in the puddle and the moon disappears from that puddle. And it cuts to the present time of the interview and you see the lights out in the interview. It's not just artsy to be artsy. It's a perfect transition and useful in storytelling. They're hitting all the sweet spots. So then back in 1980, we go the day after the kids went missing, and we're at West Finger Middle School, where Wayne will meet his future wife, a teacher, Amelia. You can see how well Mahershala plays his infatuation for Amelia here, where he's just gazing at her the whole time he's talking to her, even when she's talking to somebody else. Unfortunately, I'm a little suspect of her acting. It's kind of one note so far and stays at this like almost not believable personality type where she's like, hey, I'm always happy and giddity and just easygoing. But it's just staying right here. I think that will change. But so far in episode 1 and in episode 2, I didn't feel that yet. Time will tell. But they do have good chemistry, so I appreciate that. And we see the teacher, she starts talking about Will, saying he has a sensitivity. You always just worry about the sensitive ones. Another great written scene here, because while she's saying that about Will, you can see in the look in Wayne's eyes that he relates to Will there. He is a sensitive guy. And now he's getting her vibe towards that. And he says an important line to her, how is it here? You know. And she's like, I hear things time to time. They're all poor here, that's the main thing, but they're careful around me. This brings an important element to the show, which is race. This is super important too, because you gotta expect this. This is Arkansas in the 80s, people. Rampant racism. So that's what they're clearly talking about here. How is this teacher of color treated in a very white Arkansas school in the 80s? And it sets up, well, what you're gonna see in this season is how her and him being of color affect their jobs, how people react to them, how it affects their marriage. And I'm really interested how they're setting up her character, because we learn later on, when she writes her book in the 90s, she has a role in this investigation, as he called her a great investigator. So they're setting her character up well. And the narration in the show so far is just right. It's not invasive, it's not overdone, it just pushes the story along. It's serving its purpose. And these transitions so far have been incredible. You see this when Wayne's at the trash man's house with Roland, and he sees he has a pic of himself in Nam. And this triggers Wayne. He's like, I'm ready to go now. I don't want to be here. Such a curveball. Him looking in this mirror, talking the past, but him cutting him saying that in the present. So this goes back to seeing how these lines are actually transitioning to other times. Such a cool effect that before they change the shot, they're changing the audio. A reverse order here to transition, so it's effective, and it makes you wonder what narration even trust. He's like, I don't want to be here. He's leaving the interview in 2015. So it's be interesting to see. He goes back to that book and where that might lead to. Is this interview going to keep going on? What's the deal with that? Why was that a trigger? What did this trash man, or just thinking about Nam, triggering him there? And then back in 1980, we see Detective Rowland talking about Wayne to other police while Wayne's going out on his own. And he's like, man was a lerp and Nam. Drop him in the jungle alone, come out 2 or 3 weeks later with scalps. Like a pathfinder tracks wild boar for fun. If he wants to look alone, I'm okay with it. Again, this sets him up to be a BA. So cool. And really cool writing to amp it up again, and the music's just perfect. Also, something of note, knowing he's a lerp is also a scout. This is interesting because he found the scout's handbook in Willis's room when he was looking around it. Was he there before? Does that belong to him? Or does the perpetrator someone else who served in Nam? Does he already know them? Interesting. That's a deep hint. So he goes on this tracking adventure and he finds Will's bike. And what I love about him looking around here in the woods, what's great about Mahershala Ali's acting, he's a full body actor. And in TV, you don't see a lot of full body shots, usually just the top of their body. So a lot of people cheat that. It's not a play, they don't have to really do that. But this show knows they can have those shots of him full body shot because he's acting from top to bottom on his body. You can just see the way he's walking. He's a guy who served in Vietnam. He seems banged up, tired, but with a purpose. It's rare a lot of TV actors cannot pull this off, so props to him. So he's killing that. And he finds now his creepy doll, then another doll, and it all leads to William in a praying position, and there's no pulse on him. He is dead. This scene was so effective of him getting to Will. It built tension tremendously, and it's edge-of-your-seat stuff. And then back in 2015, we see old Wayne looking at his wife's book, and we learn the title is Life and Death and the Harvest Moon. And it says under it, murder, a child abduction, and the community it destroyed. Interesting. And this Harvest Moon thing's like the moon from the beginning that was referenced a lot. And it makes me wonder, he constantly references that moon and is thinking about his narration. Is he a trustworthy narrator at his old age? Or is most of what he's remembering from his wife's book? Is that why he's saying the moon so much? Is something he remembers because that was the title, Harvest Moon? It's interesting. If he keeps rereading that book, he's got so many of them on his shelves, he's probably buying them over again, not even realizing. He's almost become his wife's narrative. And now in this past timeline, 1980, there's no sign of the girl. He's like, we have to go look for her. Doesn't want to stop. Again, similarity there to McConaughey's detective. It makes him so likable and you root for him. Stark contrast to Rowland, his partner, who's ready to call it for a night, like Woody Harrelson was. So it is similar a lot, but it still works, and I think it's still fresh enough. But it's crazy as it cuts to the 90s, and we learn the big twist here that Julie is still alive. It's a nice twist for a premiere. I didn't expect one this soon. I like how it was revealed, saying they found her through the new fingerprint system, and her fingerprints were part of a robbery. And look at the complete care that lights up in Wayne's eyes here. Wayne really didn't even want anything to do with this case a second ago or talk about it. He didn't trust these guys, but some breaking thing comes to his knowledge like that, and you see it in his eyes just completely transform. And I like this setup for the story. In the 90s, that would be the hook that makes the 90s story stay interesting. And I like that he ends up leaving this interview table, and it doesn't copy season 1, where Matthew McConaughey's character stayed at that table narrating the whole time. So this premiere, the top thing I give it was better than any episode of season 2, in my opinion. That's an accomplishment. It went back to what worked in season 1. Show needed to get back on its feet, and it did just that. Mahershala is a monster of an actor to carry such a tall task, just like McConaughey did, so nice casting. And if you're worried here it's too similar to season 1 for your taste, watch episode 2. You'll see it nicely separates it. If you already watched episode 2, check out my review for it, which will be linked above. So it's all clicking so far. I'm giving this episode a 9.4. Exciting, great pace, great setup, a nice twist at the end. And biggest props was it was a focused storyline, easy to understand, even though it was 3 timelines, which is an impressive feat. Something like a show like Westworld got too far in and couldn't connect all timelines without making it so confusing. Same thing with True Detective Season 2, so good job on them making that possible. Please comment below with your thoughts, theories. I read every comment and try to respond as many as I can, so don't be shy. Please follow me at SteveVarley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And please subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews of True Detective. I'll be doing every episode, and my review for episode 2 is up now, so make sure to check that out if you already watched that episode. And if you haven't, watch episode 2, it's already out, and then watch my review. I'll see you next time.